I see now that one thing I forgot is to actually give names to these three images as well. I called this one front view. I need to give these names too. And I can't really tell what they are, so I'm going to have to choose them and bring them back into the perspective view just so I can see what they are. However, one neat trick is if you select all of these, I'm just holding down the Shift key. If you hold the Alt key down while you click a checkbox, Alt, click, it brings back all of them. In other words, if you want to modify a property of multiple objects, you can usually use the Alt key to do that. All right, so now let's go ahead and clean this up. So this would be the back view here, right? This would be the side view. And of course, this is our top view. Okay, so now that we have these named, we can select them all again and then Alt-click this display perspective and hide them all away. All right, I'll press Alt-A to deselect, and there we go. We are ready to do something, but what should we do first? Well, let's hit the 3 key and go to the side view. And I think what I'd like to do is just bring in at least some temporary cylinders for the tires, just to get a sense of how big it is in our scene here. Now, you may have heard before that you should model to scale. In other words, create the models that you're building to real-world scale. Because of things like modern lighting and texturing techniques, as well as creating particle effects and dynamic effects and things like that, those are all based on real-world scale. So as I said, you may have heard people say model to scale. Well, you don't really need to model to scale, but it needs to end up that way. In other words, it really doesn't matter what size you use while you're modeling the object, because in the end you can select it all and scale it down to however big you want. So if you were modeling, say, a ladybug, trying to model that real-world size from the very beginning is going to be very difficult because of camera clipping and some of the tools working on such a small scale. So I like to model big, and then when it's all done, select everything and scale it down to the size it should be. All right, so let's go ahead and create some cylinders for the tires. To create any object, you can just come up here to the Add menu, and you can also, in the 3D view, press Shift-A to bring up the Add menu as well. So I'm going to go to Mesh and Cylinder. And the cylinder here, if we click right here to open this panel up, we can see that it has 32 sides, that it has a 1 meter radius, and it's 2 meters tall. It also has a cap fill here of an N-gon. You can see if we pull this down, we can have a cap fill or a top and a bottom of an N-gon, a triangle fan, or nothing at all. An N-gon is any polygon that has more than 4 sides. Currently, since this cylinder has 32 sides here, the polygons on the top and the bottom have 32 sides as well. So if we change this to, say, a triangle fan, now we're going to have triangles up here on top instead of just one big polygon face. If I tab into edit mode, you can see that here, that triangle fan. Okay, so if we tab back into object mode and I go back to that side view with the 3 key, let's now turn this cylinder in the y-axis. You can see the y-axis is going to the right and left here when we're in global orientation. You can see the y-axis up here as well. So to turn something around the y-axis, we have a couple of options. We can come over here to the rotate tool right here, and then if I tumble around, we can see it here. We can click and drag on that green axis, since you can see the y-axis is green. I can click and drag on this and turn it. And you can see up in the upper left-hand corner the rotation in degrees, right? If I hold the Control key down, it'll snap it in 5-degree increments. So there's 90 degrees. Now, let me just hit Control-Z and undo that just for a minute. Let me show you another way we can do that. We can press R for rotate, press Y for the axis that we're going to turn around, and press 90, and that'll be the number of degrees that will turn it. And then, of course, we have to hit Enter. So there we go. It's 2 different ways of doing the same thing. All right, I'll hit that 3 key, and to scale this down, I'm going to hit the S key, scale it down to about the right size, and click. Hit the G key and just bring that right over here. Can't see through it right now, so let's go to wireframe mode. I'll hit the Z key and go to wireframe. And I noticed that when I hit the Z key and we have this white background, we can't see the shortcut key here in the 3D view, right? If I hit the N key to open that panel, we can't see it very well. So maybe I ought to reduce the opacity of these images. Yeah, let's do that. Here, let me just go, I'll hit Z and go to wireframe. And now I'm going to hit S and scale this down a bit. I'm just going to try and get it about the right size. Hit the G key, etc. Scale it down a little more, G key. And I'm just trying to put it in place. And even doing this, it seems like this white background is just a little too bright to be able to see things easily. So now that we've done this, I'm going to tumble around and you can see it there. I'll hit the Z key and go back to solid mode. Now let's bring those images back again and let's adjust the opacity. So I'll click on the back view, front, side, top. Alt-click on display in perspective, so there they are. I'm going to Alt-click on use alpha. There we go. And then I'm going to Alt-click and drag on the transparency. You can see if I drag, they'll all change the opacity or transparency as well at the same time. So let's maybe take it down to 0.25. There we go. So we can still see it, but it isn't quite as bright in the viewport. Maybe that'll help us both with moving objects around and seeing the shortcut keys here in the viewport. All right, so let's go to the front view, hit the 1 key, and now we can maybe scale this thing down in the x-axis here. If I click here, you can see the x-axis is the red one. So I can hit S and X and scale this down. And now let's move it to one side over here. Yeah, there we go, and hit S and X, and maybe I'll scale it out just a little bit more like that. And these are just temporary tires. Ultimately, we're only going to bring one tire or one wheel tire combination into Unity because that one tire is going to be used to be parented to all 4 of the wheels for the vehicle rig. But for now, we're going to use these as temporary pieces. Now let's duplicate this. Let's put the other tire in over here. I'm going to press Shift D, and then I'm going to press the X key. And now I can slide that over in the X-axis right over here. All right, so now let's select these 2. I'll go back to the side view with the 3 key, and let's duplicate these. I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and then I'll press the Y key, and now we can only move it in the Y-axis. There. Went a little too far there. There we go, right about there. Okay, let's see how that is. So there we have just the beginnings of our vehicle. We're just kind of blocking it out, getting a sense of what shapes we're going to use as we flesh this out. So in the next video, let's start working on the front part of the vehicle, the hood and the fenders.